Admiral Jake Morrison stood at the main window of Aurora Prime, watching Earth slowly turn below him. The massive orbital station had been his home for 3 years now. It was humanity's first line of defense against anything that might come. From the dark space beyond their solar system, most days, nothing happened. The sensors showed empty space, distant stars, and the usual radio noise from Earth's colonies on Mars and the Moon. But today was different. "Admiral, you need to see." This Lieutenant Ben Walker's voice carried a note of concern that made Jake turn away from the window. The young officer was hunched over his console, his face pale in the blue glow of the displays. "What is it, Walker?" Jake moved to stand behind the lieutenant's chair. The sensor readings showed something that made his blood run cold. 12. Massive objects were moving toward Earth from beyond Neptune. They were huge, each one the size of a small city, and they were coming fast. "Sir, they're not asteroids. Energy signatures are off the charts. These things are powered. They're ships." Walker's hand shook slightly as he adjusted the sensors to get a better reading. Jake felt his stomach drop. In all his years in the Earth Defense Force, he had never seen anything like this. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they had their answer, and it was coming straight at them. "Get me General Ryan Foster on the secure channel." Now, Jake moved to his command chair and activated the emergency protocols. Across the station, red lights began flashing and alarms started ringing. The main screen flickered to life, showing the stern face of General Foster from his command center deep beneath the Colorado mountains. "Morrison, what's your status?" "General, we have 12 unknown vessels approaching Earth from the outer system. They're massive, and they're moving with purpose. This isn't a random encounter." Foster's jaw tightened. "How long until they reach us?" "At their current speed, maybe 6 hours?" "Sir, these ships are unlike anything we've ever built, or at least 10 times larger than our biggest vessels." Down on Earth, Dr. Lisa Carter was working late in her laboratory at the Global Science Institute. She specialized in the search for alien life, though she had never expected to find it this way. Her computer terminal beeped with an urgent message from Aurora Prime. As she read the report, her hands began to tremble. "This is it?" she whispered to herself. "First contact." But as she studied the data streaming in from the orbital sensors, her excitement turned to fear. These ships weren't sending friendly greetings. They were coming in a military formation, and they were heading straight for Earth. Captain Alex Turner was aboard the Deep Space Vessel Defender, patrolling the edge of the solar system when the alert came through. He immediately changed course. To intercept the unknown ships. His crew of 30 was brave, but they all knew they were flying toward something far beyond their understanding. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," reported Communications Officer Mary Johnson. "It's coming from the lead ship. Put it through the speakers." The bridge filled with a strange, mechanical voice speaking broken English. "We are the Kalari Empire. Your world is suitable for our expansion. You have 7 rotations to evacuate your primitive species. Resistance is futile." The bridge fell silent. Turner felt the weight of the moment, humanity's first contact with an alien species, and it was a demand for surrender. "This is Captain Alex Turner of the Earth Vessel Defender. We request peaceful dialogue. Earth is our home. We will not abandon it." The response came quickly, and it was not what Turner had hoped for. "You've been warned. Your compliance is not required. It is demanded." Back on Aurora Prime, Admiral Morrison was coordinating. With defense forces across the solar system, every available ship was being called back to Earth. The Mars colonies were sending their 3 patrol vessels. The moon base was preparing its defense satellites. But Jake knew it wouldn't be enough. Humanity had built their space forces too. Handle pirates and asteroid threats? Not an alien invasion. "Admiral, the ships are slowing down," reported Lieutenant Walker. "They're taking position around Earth. It looks like they're forming a blockade." Jake watched the tactical display with growing dread. The 12 alien ships had arranged themselves in a perfect sphere around Earth, each one positioned to cover a different section of space. Nothing would be able to leave or enter the planet. Without their permission, Dr. Carter was now working frantically to decode the alien transmissions. Her computers were analyzing every word, every sound pattern, trying to understand more about these Kalari. What she found was disturbing. Her language was efficient and cold. They spoke about humans the way humans might talk about insects in a garden. They don't see us as intelligent beings, she reported to the emergency council meeting. To them, we're just something in the way of their expansion. General Foster's face was grim as he addressed the Global Defense Network. All military forces are now on high alert. We're dealing with a species that has technology far beyond ours. But we will not surrender our world without a fight. Captain Turner tried one more time to establish peaceful contact. Kalari ships, we are willing to discuss terms. Perhaps we can find a solution that doesn't require violence. This time the alien response was immediate and brutal. A beam of energy shot out from the nearest Kalari ship and struck the defender. The ship's systems went dark instantly. Emergency power kicked in, but the main engines were dead. They disabled us with a single shot. Turner reported over the emergency channel. The weapon was precise. They wanted to send a message, not destroy us. The message was clear. The Kalari could destroy any human ship whenever they wanted. Had disabled the defender as a demonstration of their power. On Earth, people looked up at the night sky and saw 12 new stars that hadn't been there before. News broadcasts around the world were reporting the same thing. Earth was under alien occupation. The invaders had given humanity 7 days to leave their home planet. In cities across the globe, panic was starting to set in. But there were also signs of something else. In New York, citizens were gathering. In the streets, not to flee, but to demand that their government fight back. In London, military recruitment centers were overwhelmed with volunteers. In Tokyo, factories were already starting to retool for weapons production. Admiral Morrison stood once again at his window. Looking down at Earth, the planet looked peaceful. From this distance, but he knew that down there, 7 billion people were facing the greatest threat in human history. The Kalari had come expecting easy conquest of a primitive world. They had studied human technology and found it lacking. They had observed human conflicts and deemed them inefficient. But there was something the Kalari had not understood about: humanity. They had never faced a species that grew more dangerous when threatened with extinction. They had never encountered beings who became stronger when they had nothing left to lose. Sir Lieutenant Walker called out, "We're receiving reports from all over Earth. Military forces are mobilizing, but so are civilian groups. It looks like people aren't planning to evacuate." Jake nodded grimly. "Then we'll make our stand here. Send a message to all Earth forces. Tell them that Aurora Prime will not abandon our world. If the Kalari want Earth, they'll have to take it from us." As he gave the order, Jake Morrison had no idea that he was about to witness humanity's transformation from a peaceful species into something far more dangerous. The Kalari had come expecting colonization. They were about to discover what happened when humans fight for survival. The 7 days of warning had passed, and the Kalari were done waiting. At exactly noon, Earth time, the first energy beams struck the planet from orbit. New York's skyline disappeared in a flash of brilliant light. London's ancient buildings crumbled to dust in seconds. Tokyo's massive towers fell like broken toys. Commander Steve Blake was in downtown Chicago when the attack began. He had been coordinating the evacuation of the city's 8 million people when the sky lit up with alien fire. The beam that hit the city center was precise and surgical. It destroyed everything in a perfect circle, leaving the outer areas untouched, but sending a clear message about Kalari power. "All units, this is Blake," he shouted into his radio as buildings collapsed around him. "The attack has begun. Execute Emergency Protocol 7. Get everyone underground now." Kalari had studied human cities carefully. They wanted the infrastructure intact for their own use. The orbital strikes were designed to kill as many humans as possible while leaving the buildings, roads, and power systems undamaged. It was efficient extermination, planned with cold calculation. Colonel Amy Roberts was 3 levels underground in the Denver command bunker when the reports started coming in. Satellite images showed the devastation in real time. Millions of people were dead, and the aliens had barely started their assault. "Ma'am, we're getting reports from all major cities," her aide reported. The strikes are hitting population centers, but avoiding critical infrastructure. They want our cities empty, not destroyed. Amy nodded grimly. She had been preparing for this moment since the Kalari first appeared. While politicians had hoped for peaceful solutions, military officers like her had been planning for war. Send the activation codes to all resistance cells. Operation Underground begins now. Dr. Peter Morgan was in his laboratory beneath the Pentagon when the first reports of ground landings came in. The Kalari ships were sending down smaller vessels, each one carrying hundreds of alien soldiers. Through satellite feeds, he watched as the first aliens stepped onto Earth's surface. They were nothing like the movies had imagined. The Kalari stood 8 feet tall, with bodies that looked like a cross between insects and machines. Their skin was dark and metallic, covered in what appeared to be natural armor. They moved with mechanical precision, each step calculated and purposeful. "My God," Morgan whispered as he watched the footage. "They're not just advanced, they're perfectly adapted for war." But Morgan was a weapons designer, and he was already thinking about how to fight them. Every armor had a weakness. Every shield could be broken. He just had to figure out how. The first ground battle took place in what used to be Central Park. Marine Captain Danny Price led a company of soldiers in a desperate attempt to slow the alien advance. They had positioned themselves behind makeshift barricades, hoping their conventional weapons would be effective. The Kalari soldiers moved toward them in perfect formation. Their weapons were sleek energy rifles that fired bolts of concentrated light. When the first shots were exchanged, the humans learned a terrible lesson. Their bullets bounced harmlessly off the alien armor, while the energy weapons cut through human soldiers like paper. "Fall back," Price shouted as his men died around him. "All units, fall back to secondary positions." But even as they retreated, Price was making mental notes. The aliens were strong and well-armed, but they moved predictably. They followed strict patterns, like a computer program executing code. That might be something humans could use against them. Lieutenant Kelly was monitoring the alien communications from her post in the Global Defense Network. She had been studying their language patterns since the first contact, and now she was listening to their battlefield communications. "They're reporting back to their ships," she told her supervisor. "But sir, there's something strange about how they talk. They keep using phrases like 'according to protocol' and 'as anticipated.' It's like they're following a script." Her supervisor, Major Carl Davis, leaned over her shoulder to look at the translated messages. "What do you think it means?" "I think they've done this before, many times. They have a standard procedure for conquering primitive worlds, and they're following it exactly." Davis felt a chill. "You mean we're not their first victims?" "No, sir. But that might be their weakness. They're so used to following their procedures that they might not know how to adapt when things don't go according to plan." The Kalari had indeed conquered dozens of worlds before Earth. Their methods were tried and tested. First came the orbital bombardment to break the population's will, and ground forces would occupy the major cities. Finally, the surviving population would be relocated to designated areas where they could be processed efficiently. But something was already going wrong with their Earth operation. The humans were not behaving as expected. Instead of surrendering after the orbital strikes, they were fighting back. Instead of fleeing to the countryside, they were going underground. Instead of panicking, they were organizing. Commander Nick Watson was leading a group of survivors through the ruins of Philadelphia when they encountered their first Kalari patrol. The aliens were walking through the destroyed streets, scanning for human life signs. Watson's group was hiding in the basement of a collapsed building, holding their breath as the patrol passed overhead. "They're hunting us," whispered one of the civilians. A teacher named Janet Brown, who had lost her entire school to the bombardment. "No," Watson replied quietly. "They're searching methodically. There's a difference. Hunters adapt to their prey. These things are just following a checklist." When the patrol moved on, Watson made a decision that would prove crucial to the human resistance. Instead of staying hidden, he led his group to follow the aliens. They stayed far back, watching and learning. They observed how the Kalari moved, how they communicated, how they reacted to different situations. Dr. Lisa Carter was analyzing captured alien equipment in her new laboratory. Tunnel beneath Washington, D.C., the government had moved all critical personnel underground as soon as the invasion began. She was studying a damaged alien weapon that had been recovered from the Philadelphia attack. Energy output is incredible. She reported to the emergency council. But look at this. The weapon has built-in safety systems. It's designed to prevent overload, to avoid accidental discharge, to minimize collateral damage. General Foster, attending the meeting via secure video link, leaned forward. "What are you saying, Doctor?" "I'm saying their weapons are engineered. To be safe, they have automatic shutoffs, power limiters, all kinds of protective systems. They're designed by a species that's very careful about avoiding accidents." Foster understood immediately. It's unlike us. Exactly. We build weapons to be as destructive as possible. They build them to be controlled and predictable. That's a fundamental difference we might be able to exploit. The first week of the invasion was a disaster for humanity. Millions were dead. Major cities were in ruins, and the aliens controlled most of the planet's surface. But in the underground tunnels, in the hidden bunkers, in the secret facilities, something important was happening. Humans were learning. Marine Captain Danny Price had regrouped his surviving soldiers in an abandoned subway system. They had started calling themselves the Tunnel Rats, and they were developing new tactics specifically for fighting the Kalari. Instead of direct confrontation, they used hit-and-run attacks. Instead of trying to destroy the aliens, they focused on disrupting their operations. Remember, Price told his troops, "They expect us to fight like soldiers. So we're not going to fight like soldiers, we're going to fight like humans." The difference was becoming clear. The Kalari fought with discipline and precision. They followed rules and protocols. They fought to minimize their own casualties and complete their objectives efficiently. Humans fought to win, no matter the cost. Dr. Peter Morgan had made his first breakthrough. Working with scavenged alien technology, he had discovered that the Kalari energy shields operated on a specific frequency. More importantly, he had found a way to disrupt that frequency using modified human electronics. "Not much," he reported to the resistance leadership. "But if we can hit them with the right electromagnetic pulse, their shields will fail for about 30 seconds. 30 seconds, mused Commander Watson. That's enough time to kill them. The second week of the invasion began with humanity's first successful counterattack. Watson's group had modified an old radio transmitter with Morgan's frequency disruptor. When the next Kalari patrol came through Philadelphia, they were ready. The electromagnetic pulse hit the alien soldiers like an invisible hammer. For 30 seconds, their shields flickered and died. In those 30 seconds, human bullets found their mark. 3 Kalari soldiers fell before their shields could reactivate. It was a small victory, but it proved something crucial. The aliens could be killed. The news spread through the underground resistance networks like wildfire. Humans around the world began building their own frequency disruptors. The Kalari, who had expected quick and easy conquest, found themselves facing an enemy that was adapting faster than their protocols could handle. The war for Earth had truly begun. 3 months had passed since the invasion began, and the Kalari were starting to realize they had made a terrible mistake. What should have been a simple conquest was turning into a nightmare they had never experienced before. The human resistance was growing stronger every day, and they were fighting in ways that violated every rule of civilized warfare. Commander Nick Watson stood in the ruins of what used to be Times Square, watching a group of human children plant explosives around a Kalari supply depot. The youngest couldn't be more than 12 years old, but she worked with the calm efficiency of a trained soldier. This was what Earth had become. A world where children learned to kill before they learned to drive. "Are you sure about this plan?" asked Janet Brown, the former teacher, who had become Watson's second in command. She was holding a detonator that would destroy the entire city block, along with any humans who might be hiding nearby. "The aliens don't understand sacrifice," Watson replied. "They think logically. They calculate losses and benefits. They can't comprehend why we would destroy our own cities to hurt them." The explosion, when it came, was massive. The Kalari supply depot vanished in a ball of fire, along with 2 city blocks of New York's most famous neighborhood. But the blast also took out a major alien communication hub and killed dozens of Kalari soldiers. To the aliens, it was an incomprehensible act of destruction. To humans, it was just another day in the war for survival. Captain Sarah Mitchell was floating in the darkness of space, preparing for what she knew would be her final mission. Her ship, the Reliance, was the last functional vessel in Earth's space fleet. Everything else had been destroyed in the early days of the invasion. But engineer Tony Reed had modified the ship's engines in a way that would have horrified any safety inspector. "Sarah, you don't have to do this." Reed's voice crackled through the radio from the underground bunker where he was coordinating the mission. "We can find another way." "No, Tony, we can't. The Kalari mothership is the key to their entire operation. If we can take it out, we can break their coordination." Sarah looked at the massive alien vessel floating in orbit above Earth. It was beautiful in its own way, a work of art created by a species that valued perfection above all else. "Remember, you need to hit the cooling system directly. The explosion has to happen from the inside, or it won't work." Sarah smiled grimly. "Don't worry, I'll get close enough." Down on Earth, the resistance had evolved into something the Kalari had never encountered before. Professor Mike Johnson was teaching chemistry to a group of teenagers in an abandoned subway tunnel. But this wasn't a normal science class. He was showing them how to make explosives from household chemicals. "The beauty of this mixture," he explained, "is that the aliens can't detect it. Their sensors are looking for military-grade explosives, not cleaning supplies and fertilizer." One of his students, a 16-year-old named Bobby Lee, raised his hand. "Professor, what about the radiation? Won't this hurt us too?" Johnson's expression darkened. "Son, we're fighting for the survival of our species. We're past worrying about long-term health effects. This was the reality of the war. Humans were using weapons and tactics that were slowly poisoning their own planet. They were turning Earth into a toxic wasteland, but they didn't care. Better a poisoned world under human control than a pristine planet ruled by aliens." Dr. Claire Adams was working in a medical facility deep beneath the ruins of Chicago. She was treating wounded resistance fighters, but her real work was something far more disturbing. She was studying captured Kalari bodies, looking for biological weaknesses. "They're not entirely mechanical," she reported to the resistance leadership. "There are organic components. Organic things can get sick." General Kevin Lewis, who had taken over coordination of the global resistance, leaned forward. "What are you suggesting, Doctor?" "I'm suggesting we make them sick. We create diseases that target their biology specifically. Biological warfare." The room fell silent. Even hardened military officers understood the implications. They were talking about creating weapons that could kill entire species. "Dr. Lewis said slowly, "That's genocide." "Yes, it is. They started it when they decided to exterminate us." The moral boundaries that had once defined human civilization were disappearing. The Kalari invasion had stripped away every ethical consideration, except one: survival. Humans were becoming something they had never been before, and they were discovering they were very good at it. Intelligence officer Lisa Shaw had successfully infiltrated the Kalari communication network by hiding transmitters in the ruins of major cities. She was listening to their reports back to their homeworld, and what she heard was encouraging. "They're scared," she reported to the emergency council. "They're calling us unpredictable and dangerously adaptive." One of their commanders actually used the word impossible to describe human resistance. "What exactly are they saying?" asked General Foster. "They're reporting that human behavior doesn't match any of their previous conquest experiences. Expected us to surrender after the orbital bombardment. They expected us to flee when their ground forces landed. They expected us to negotiate when we started taking casualties. Instead, we got angrier. Their reports say that human resistance increases in direct proportion to the damage we take. They can't understand why we're fighting harder now than we did at the beginning." The answer was simple, though the aliens couldn't grasp it. Humans had realized they were facing extinction, and extinction was unacceptable. Every dead city made them more determined. Every fallen soldier made them more creative. Every alien victory made them more dangerous. Captain Danny Price had evolved his tunnel rats into something resembling a modern military unit, except their tactics would have made traditional soldiers sick. They had started using human corpses as bait, rigging bodies with explosives to kill any Kalari who came to investigate. They had begun poisoning water supplies in areas under alien control. It started using children as messengers because the aliens were less likely to shoot them on sight. "We're not soldiers anymore," Price told his men during a briefing in an abandoned sewer tunnel. "We're something else. Something worse." "What are we then?" asked Sergeant Bob Williams. "We're humans who have nothing left to lose, and that makes us the most dangerous thing in the universe." The Kalari were beginning to understand this truth. Their latest reports to their homeworld were filled with confusion and growing fear. They had conquered 47 worlds before Earth, and every conquest had followed the same pattern. The natives would fight briefly, then surrender when they realized resistance was futile. But humans weren't following the pattern. They were breaking every rule of logical behavior. They were destroying their own infrastructure to deny it too, the aliens. They were using weapons that hurt themselves as much as their enemies, were sending children on suicide missions. Captain Sarah Mitchell's final mission began at dawn. She piloted the Reliance on a collision course with the Kalari. Mothership, knowing she would never see another sunrise, the alien vessel was massive, beautiful, and utterly alien. It represented everything the Kalari stood for: perfection, efficiency, and cold logic. "Tony, can you hear me?" She radioed back to Earth. "I'm here, Sarah. You're almost at the target. Tell me something. Do you think we're the good guys anymore?" There was a long pause. "I think we're the guys who are going to survive. And right now, that's all that matters." The Reliance struck the Kalari mothership at full speed. The explosion was visible from Earth's surface, a new star that blazed for 30 seconds before fading. But the damage was more than anyone had hoped for. The mothership's destruction created a chain reaction that disabled 2 more alien vessels and disrupted their entire communication network. For the first time since the invasion began, the Kalari fleet was in chaos. Their perfect coordination was broken. Their logical systems were failing. And on the surface of Earth, 7 billion humans saw the explosion and understood what it meant. The aliens could be hurt. They could be killed. They could be beaten. The war was far from over, but something fundamental had changed. Now the Kalari were no longer the hunters. They were becoming the hunted. They were about to learn what happened when humans stopped being civilized and started being human. The destruction of the Kalari mothership had changed everything. For the first time in 6 months, the aliens were reacting instead of acting. Their perfect formation was broken, their communication network was in chaos, and their ground forces were starting to make mistakes. But the humans weren't celebrating. They were getting ready to finish what the aliens had started. General Kevin Lewis stood in the command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, watching as reports flooded in from around the world. The Kalari were pulling back from their forward positions, consolidating their forces around major strategic points. To a traditional military mind, this looked like smart defensive planning. To Lewis, it looked like fear. "They're scared," he told his staff. "For the first time since they arrived, they're acting like they might lose." Colonel Amy Roberts nodded from her position at the tactical display. "Our intelligence shows they've requested reinforcements from their homeworld." The message went out 3 days ago. And the response? According to Lisa Shaw's intercepts, they were told to finish quickly or face dishonor. No additional forces are coming. Lewis felt a grim satisfaction. The Kalari Empire had expected a quick conquest. Instead, they were stuck in a grinding war of attrition, with a species that seemed to get stronger with every loss. Their superiors were not pleased. Dr. Rachel Thompson was working in a laboratory that had been carved out of solid rock to miles underground. Around her, teams of scientists and engineers were reverse engineering captured Kalari technology. The aliens had made a fatal mistake by leaving their equipment behind when they retreated from forward positions. "The energy weapons are actually quite simple," she explained to the assembled team. "The complexity comes from all the safety systems. Look at this!"
Oh.
She pointed to a complex series of circuits inside a captured alien rifle. "This entire section is designed to prevent overload. This part prevents accidental discharge. This component regulates power output to avoid harming the user. Engineer Tony Reed, who had survived the destruction of his ship by being on the ground when it happened, studied the weapon with interest. What happens if we remove the safety systems? Then, you get a weapon that's 3 times more powerful but has a 50% chance of exploding in your hands, Thompson replied. Perfect, Reed said with a dark smile. Let's build 1,000 of them. This was the new human philosophy. If a weapon was dangerous to use, they would use it anyway. If a tactic had a high casualty rate, they would accept the casualties. Victory required sacrifice. It would sacrifice everything. Captain Danny Price was leading his tunnel. Rats through the ruins of Manhattan when they encountered something that made them stop and stare. A group of Kalari soldiers was retreating. It's not fighting and falling back, not conducting a tactical withdrawal, but actually running away from a fight. I've never seen them do that before, whispered Sergeant Bob Williams. Neither have I, Price replied, which means we're doing something right. The humans had learned to fight dirty, and it was working. They had started using the aliens' own sense of logic against them. Kalari soldiers were programmed to minimize casualties and complete objectives efficiently. When humans made both of those goals impossible, the aliens began to break down in the ruins of London. A group of resistance fighters led by former police officer John Davis had taken a different approach. Instead of trying to kill the aliens, they were trying to drive them insane. They would attack at random times, retreat before the aliens could respond, then attack again somewhere else. They would play human music at full volume in the middle of the night. They would leave human corpses arranged in patterns that had no meaning but suggested some kind of ritual. We're not trying to hurt them, Davis explained to his team. We're trying to make them afraid. Fear is something they don't understand, but they can't ignore it. The psychological warfare was working. Kalari soldiers were reporting strange dreams, difficulty concentrating, and an inability to predict human behavior. Some were requesting transfer to other worlds. Others were simply refusing to patrol certain areas. Admiral Jake Morrison was still aboard Aurora Prime. Though his space station was now more of a fortress than a research facility, the orbital station had been converted into a weapons platform, and Morrison was preparing for the largest space battle in human history. Sir, we're detecting movement in the Kalari fleet, reported Lieutenant Ben Walker. It looks like they're repositioning for something big. Morrison studied the tactical display. The remaining alien ships were moving into a tight formation. Around Earth, it was a defensive posture, but it was also a preparation for bombardment.
Out there.
Getting ready to sterilize the planet, Morrison realized. They've decided they can't control us, so they're going to kill us all. The thought should have been terrifying, but Morrison found himself almost relieved. The aliens were finally fighting like humans, choosing total destruction over partial defeat. It was a strategy he could understand and counter. Dr. Claire Adams had made her breakthrough in biological warfare. Working with samples from captured Kalari bodies, she had developed a virus that targeted their unique biology. It was horrifying in its efficiency, designed to spread through their communication networks and kill every alien it touched. It's ready, she reported to the resistance leadership. But once we use this, there's no going back. This weapon will kill every Kalari on Earth and probably spread to their homeworld eventually. Will it affect humans? Asked General Lewis. No, it's specifically designed to target their biology. But General, this is genocide. We're talking about wiping out an entire species. Lewis was quiet for a long moment. Around him, the other leaders of the human resistance waited for his decision. Finally, he spoke. Doctor, they came here to exterminate us. They've killed billions of our people. They're preparing to destroy our entire planet. I'm not going to let moral considerations stop us from surviving. Deploy the weapon. The virus was released simultaneously from hidden locations around the world. It spread through the Kalari communication networks like wildfire, transmitted through their own technology. Within hours, alien soldiers were collapsing in the field. Within days, entire garrisons were dead. But the Kalari weren't finished. Their fleet had one final card to play. If they couldn't conquer Earth, they would make sure no one could ever live there again. Captain Alex Turner had been rescued from his disabled ship months ago and was now commanding a makeshift fleet of civilian vessels that had been converted into warships. They were preparing to face the Kalari fleet in what everyone knew would be the final battle. "All ships, this is Turner," he broadcast to the small fleet. "We're going up against ships that are bigger, faster, and more advanced than anything we have. Our only advantage is that we're willing to die for our world, and they're not." The battle began when the Kalari fleet opened fire on Aurora Prime. Admiral Morrison's station was destroyed in the first salvo, but not before it launched every missile and drone in its arsenal. The Admiral went down with his ship, but his sacrifice bought precious time for the human fleet to close the distance. Turner's converted cargo ship, the New Hope, was the first to reach the alien formation. Following the same suicide tactics that had worked before, he rammed his vessel directly into the nearest Kalari ship. The explosion disabled both vessels, but it also created an opening in the alien formation. One by one, the human ships followed Turner's example. They were outgunned and outnumbered, but they were fighting for their home. When conventional weapons failed, they used ramming attacks. When their ships were disabled, they self-destructed to take alien vessels with them. Space battle raged for 6 hours. When it ended, most of the human fleet was gone. But so was the Kalari fleet. Only 3 alien ships remained, and they were badly damaged. On the surface of Earth, the surviving Kalari ground forces were dying from the biological weapon. Those who remained were no longer fighting to conquer the planet. They were fighting to survive long enough to escape. The war was almost over, but the humans weren't ready to let their enemies leave. They had learned too much about what the Kalari were capable of. They had seen what happened when an advanced species decided to exterminate a primitive one. They would not let it happen again. To anyone anywhere in the galaxy, the final phase of the war was about to begin, and it would be the most brutal yet. The 3 remaining Kalari ships hung in orbit above Earth like dying stars. Inside them, the surviving alien commanders were sending desperate messages to their homeworld. The messages were not about victory or conquest. They were warnings, Commander. Zektal, the highest-ranking Kalari still alive, stood in the bridge of his damaged vessel. Around him, his crew was dying from the human biological weapon. The virus had spread through their ship's air systems, and there was no cure. Perhaps ours left to live. "Send the final report," he ordered his communications officer, whose breathing was already labored. Double quotes. "Yes, Commander." "What should it say?" Zektal looked down at the planet below. From space, Earth looked beautiful and peaceful. There was no sign of the war that had raged for 8 months. No hint of the species that had just committed genocide against his people. "Tell them we failed. Tell them the humans are not what we expected. Tell them to stay away from this world." On Earth's surface, the war was ending in the most brutal way possible. The surviving Kalari ground forces were trapped in small pockets around the globe, dying slowly from the biological weapon. But the humans were not content to let them die. Naturally, they wanted to make sure every alien was dead. Captain Danny Price led his tunnel rats through the ruins of Central Park, hunting the last Kalari soldiers in New York. His men had painted their faces with alien blood and wore necklaces made from Kalari weapons. They looked more like primitive warriors than modern soldiers. "Remember," Price told his team, "we don't take prisoners. We don't show mercy. We finish this completely." The final battles were not really battles at all. They were executions. Humans surrounded the dying aliens and killed them one by one. Some used guns, some used knives, some used their bare hands. They wanted to feel their enemies die. In London, former police officer John Davis was leading a group of civilians through the alien-controlled areas. They were not soldiers, but they had become something harder and more dangerous. Survivors who had lost everything and had nothing left to lose. There, Davis pointed to a building where the last Kalari in the city had barricaded themselves. "They're all sick. They can barely fight. But we're going to kill them anyway." The civilians nodded. Among them were teachers, doctors, store clerks, and office workers. People who had once lived normal, peaceful lives. The war had turned them into killers, and they were good at it. General Kevin Lewis was coordinating the final cleanup from his bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains. Reports were coming in from around the world as the last alien strongholds fell. Beijing had been cleared 2 hours ago. Moscow reported all aliens dead. Sydney was finishing up their final sweep. Sir Colonel Amy Roberts approached with a tablet, showing the latest casualty figures. We've lost approximately 4 billion people. More than half our population is dead. Lewis nodded grimly. And the aliens? Complete extermination. Every Kalari on Earth is dead or dying. The biological weapon was completely effective. Still in orbit, but our sensors show massive die-offs aboard all 3 vessels. They'll be dead within hours. Lewis felt a mix of satisfaction and emptiness. They had won, but the victory felt hollow. Earth was a graveyard. Most of humanity's cities were in ruins. The planet itself was poisoned by the weapons they had used. Dr. Lisa Carter was in her laboratory, monitoring the alien ship's communications. She had been listening to their final messages, and what she heard made her feel something she hadn't expected: pity. "They're scared," she reported to the emergency council. "Their final transmissions are full of fear. They're warning their homeworld. About us, they're calling us a extinctional-level threat and recommending that Earth be avoided permanently." "Good," replied General Lewis. "Let them be scared. Let them tell everyone in the galaxy what happens when you threaten humanity." But Carter was troubled by something else in the messages. "General, they're not just warning about Earth, they're warning about humans in general. They think we're going to come after them, are we?" asked Dr. Rachel Thompson. The question hung in the air. The war had changed humanity in fundamental ways. They had become something darker, more ruthless, more willing to use any means necessary to survive. The question was whether they would stop being that thing now that the immediate threat was over. Engineer Tony Reed was working on a new project in the ruins of NASA's Johnson Space Center. Using captured Kalari technology, he was building humanity's first, faster-than-light spacecraft. The design was crude compared to alien engineering, but it would work. "Why are we building this?" asked his assistant, a young woman named Kate Phillips, who had lost her entire family in the bombardment of Houston. "Because we need to make sure this never happens again," Reed replied. "The only way to guarantee human survival is to become the strongest species in the galaxy." The implications were clear. Humanity was preparing to do to other species what the Kalari had tried to do to them. They were going to spread across the galaxy, and they were going to be the ones making the threats. On the 3rd day after the final ground battle, the last Kalari ship went silent. Commander Zechtel and his crew were dead, killed by a weapon that had been designed specifically to exterminate his species. The biological warfare had worked perfectly, but before he died, Zechtel had managed to send one final message to the Kalari homeworld. It was not a military report or a tactical analysis. It was a simple warning that would echo through the galaxy for generations. "We came for colonization. They gave us annihilation. Avoid the humans. They do not fight like civilized beings. They fight like death itself." The message was received by the Kalari High Command 47 light-years away. Within hours, it was being broadcast to every species in the known galaxy. The humans of Earth had just announced their presence to the universe in the most violent way possible. Dr. Claire Adams was studying the effects of the biological weapon she had created. It had been more successful than she had hoped. Not only had it killed every Kalari on Earth, but simulations showed it would spread to any member of their species who came into contact with infected material. "It's essentially a species killer," she explained to the Survivors Council. "If any Kalari ship ever visits a world where infected material exists, their entire crew will die within days. We've made it impossible for them to colonize any world we've ever been to." The weapon was so effective that it essentially guaranteed the extinction of the Kalari species. Any world they tried to colonize in the future would be off-limits if humans had ever been their first captain. Alex Turner had survived the space battle and was now leading the effort to reverse engineer the alien technology. The humans were learning fast, adapting Kalari systems to their own needs. They were building weapons, ships, and tools that combined human ingenuity with alien science. "We're not just going to survive," Turner told his team. "We're going to thrive. We're going to make sure that what happened to Earth never happens to any human world again." The war was over, but its effects would last forever. Humanity had learned that the universe was a dangerous place, full of species that would try to exterminate them without warning. They had also learned that they were capable of fighting back in ways that would terrify their enemies. 6 months after the last alien died, the first human starship left Earth's solar system. It was carrying a message to the galaxy broadcast on every frequency the Kalari had used. "This is humanity. We are the species that survived the Kalari invasion. We're the species that developed biological weapons in 8 months. We are the species that chose genocide over surrender. We are spreading across the galaxy now, and we remember what was done to us. To all species who might consider Earth a target, we are no longer a primitive world. We are a species that has learned to fight for survival, and we are very good at it. Come in peace or do not come at all." The message was received by hundreds of species across the galaxy. Most chose to avoid human space entirely. A few sent peaceful greetings, none sent invasion fleets. Earth had become the center of human civilization, but it was a scarred and changed world. The cities were rebuilt, but they were built as fortresses. The people were survivors, but they were also warriors. The planet was beautiful, but it was also a weapon. And in the depths of space, human ships spread outward like seeds from a dying flower, carrying with them the knowledge of what happens when you threaten humanity's survival. The Kalari had come. For colonization, Earth had given them annihilation, and the galaxy would never forget the lesson.